Teenager Fran is chatting with his best friend and girlfriend via video call. He sits by his computer, drinking beer and smoking. Suddenly, his father Luis walks into the room. Luis has to wake up early, but the loud noise keeps him from sleeping. Fran rudely snaps at him, telling him to leave, but Luis stays and tries to talk to his son, while Fran's friends patiently wait. The next morning, tired and irritated, Luis heads to work to manage his store. At the same time, the lazy son is having fun, skipping school. He smokes with his friends, listens to music, drinks, and gets affectionate with his girlfriend. Later, his father is informed that Fran has dropped out of school, and then he gets a call from the hospital asking him to pick up his son, who's been involved in a fight. Luis has to go to the emergency room, where he meets the parents of Migu, Fran's friend. They express their concerns, saying Fran has a bad influence on their son. After the checkup, Luis takes Fran home. He tries to talk to him on the way, but in the parking garage, Fran loses it and tries to walk away. Luis catches up to him, but the teenager screams at him and slaps him before running off. When Luis returns home in the evening, his son is already gone. Fran has left for the nightclub to hang out with his friends, dance, drink, and use illegal substances. Luis, alone, lights candles on a birthday cake. His son has turned 17. Feeling frustrated that he can't connect with his child, Luis searches online for ways to communicate with teenagers. He comes across an advertisement for aggressive behavior. Parents of troubled teenagers share their experiences, talking about how difficult it was to communicate with their children before and how easy it became after. As Luis watches the videos, he loses track of time. By night, a high Fran stumbles down the hallway, swaying. He stops by his father's slightly open door, but Luis turns off the light to avoid yet another uncomfortable conversation. The next day, Luis attends the Simca presentation. The charismatic coach delivers an inspiring speech about how discipline will teach spoiled kids real values and drive, preparing them for successful business careers. While listening to the speech, Luis's son, Fran, is on his phone drinking alcohol. Migu, urged by his mother, distances himself from Fran, while the girl hints that their relationship was never serious, so it's inappropriate to make long-term plans. Upset, Fran continues to drown his sorrows. This is how his father finds him that evening. Later, two trained individuals drag the half-naked teenager out of his bedroom. He fights back, kicks, screams, and calls for his father. But Luis has already packed a suitcase and accompanies his son to the door of the boarding school. The boy is thrown into a minivan and driven along a scenic winding road far from the city. There, he is greeted by Oscar, the head of the caretakers. Oscar is displeased that the newcomer is barefoot and half-naked. The students are expected to maintain discipline and be properly dressed. He also doesn't like the handcuffs on the teenager and orders them to be removed. Fran sees this as a friendly gesture and insults the guard. However, Oscar immediately restores the social hierarchy. He twists the rebellious boy's arm, shoves his face into the wall, and reads aloud the basic rules, which include maintaining respectful silence in the presence of elders. The right to speak is a privilege. Fran shaved bald, given a uniform, and led to join the rest of the group. The kids with bloody marks on their chins watch the daily video. They greet the newcomer with a rehearsed chant. When Fran tries to talk to a neighbor, Oscar pauses the video, and the children instantly jump up, reciting the rules about silence. Confused by their synchronized response, Fran looks around, realizing that they won't go easy on him here. The daily routine includes strictly regulated, useful labor for the benefit of society, like collecting clothespins, as well as group meals in the cafeteria. Fran observes his new companions trying to memorize the required chants. They watch videos on the TV, where psychologists drill into their minds the principles of acceptable behavior. Among the caretakers, there's also Father Nando, who stands out. Oscar reprimands him for his appearance and chewing gum, which sets a bad example for the students. The teenagers also have sessions with a psychologist, who asks not only about their hidden fears, but also about their relationships with their parents. Fran admits he misses his father, but is hurt by the fact that Luis never truly showed paternal love, including toward his mother, who left the family when Fran was little. The staff at the boarding school, led by Oscar, discusses the upcoming Freedom Day, a kind of celebration for the students meant to show what their life could be like outside the institution. As the newcomer, Nando doesn't know what Freedom Day is, and his colleagues lightly tease him, to which he responds with a dramatic speech. Later, during lunch, Nando takes out his frustration on one of the students, slamming his face into the table while the other kids quickly eat, pretending nothing is happening. During the correctional process, Nando gets carried away and sprays pepper gas into the student's eyes. This doesn't sit well with the director of the boarding school. Wealthy parents don't pay to have their children harmed. Oscar manages to smooth things over, giving his subordinate a mild reprimand, which is punctuated by a final face slam against the table. Soon, Fran successfully memorizes the rules, but he is still unfamiliar with the punishments. One night, after lights out, he sneaks out of his room. Unnoticed by the guards, he goes downstairs, where he finds the sensory deprivation section, a place for complete or partial isolation from the outside world. Even simple conversations are forbidden here. In one of the rooms, he sees a teenager strapped to a gurney, his eyes and ears covered, left alone with his thoughts. Fran removes the mask and headphones, and the boy screams, begging him to end his suffering out of mercy. The pair take refuge in the pantry and sip. Frightened by the boy's reaction, Fran runs back, but the guards notice the escape from the dorm. An alarm is raised and a manhunt begins. Fran hides in a corner, but when a guard enters, he tackles him and beats him into a bloody pulp until backup arrives to restrain him. For this act, Father Oscar punishes the entire group. The children are made to lie face down on the floor, with their chins pressed to the ground. While they remain motionless, the guards occasionally turn on bright lights and blaring music. The situation resembles the Pokemon episode that triggers epileptic seizures. After serving the punishment, Fran receives his own bloody mark on his chin. Meanwhile, the parents of the children gather for their own rehabilitation program, led by psychologist Helena. Luis explains that he can't communicate with his son, to which the doctor responds that dialogue involves both sides. Therefore, not only should the children learn to be obedient, but the parents must also participate in their children's lives. As a successful example, Helena mentions Sandra and her parents as the girl completed the program. The adults share how their lives changed after their daughter returned, but the story ends when the girl wets herself and the mother hurriedly takes her away. Back home, Luis, following the psychologist's advice, enters his son's room. On his computer, he watches a music video where his son is fooling around with his friends. Among the shots, there's a brief clip of Luis himself, as his son secretly filmed him at work. The video brings a smile to the father's face, and the next morning he goes to the boarding school to pick up his son. However, Oscar shows him the footage of the guard being beaten and convinces him that Fran is still not ready to reintegrate into society. While watching another video, the young man cracks a joke, which the caretakers overhear. The group is led to another punishment. For not paying attention to the repeatedly stated principles, they are required to stand with their hands bound and eyes covered for more than a day. Only the one who lasts the longest will pass the test, while the others will be sent to the sensory deprivation room. Those who sit down are escorted out by the guards. Meanwhile, the parents are attending another training session on mutual understanding. Luis gets to know Sandra's parents better. They are concerned about their daughter's mental health but hope that the training will help. The next day, the remaining teenagers are fed, but the portions are one less than for the prisoners. Unable to reach an agreement, the kids start arguing and the guards take away all their food. Later, as the second day begins, Helena approaches the cage. She films the kids to gather evidence of the cruelty and methods used at the boarding school. Nando catches her and takes her to Oscar. However, the leader doesn't see anything wrong with the data leak. All these methods are legal. On the third day, Fran is the last one standing and returns to the regimented life according to the schedule. Meanwhile, Luis is building a warm relationship with Sandra's mother. They have lunch together, and their acquaintance grows into a romantic interest. However, while they kiss in a parking lot, Sandra's daughter is watching the videos of the tortures posted by Helena. Unable to bear the overwhelming memories of what she endured, the girl jumps off the roof, right in front of her father, who is immersed in his work. The director reprimands Oscar for the information leak, which leads to stricter rules and regulations at the boarding school. The students are pushed hard with physical exercises, some even vomiting in the gym. He continues to practice beating the students with the silent approval of the rest of the staff. Eventually, Fran rebels. He freezes in place and refuses to leave the cafeteria. Oscar orders him to be dragged to the sensory deprivation room, where the boy is strapped down and his eyes and ears are covered. After some time, the lack of external stimuli causes his brain to create hallucinations. Images images triggered by the past. The torture ends when the day of freedom arrives. The boys and girls groups gather in the gym to dance a waltz. The exhausted Fran is also brought in, but he doesn't participate and watches from a chair. The students, divided into pairs, waltz on command, but one of the boys, looking at Fran, who dared to openly rebel, freezes. Others follow his example. Despite Oscar's shouting and hitting, the event is ruined, and Fran watches with a satisfied grin. Nando even had to restrain the director before he caused any harm in his hysteria. Luis admits that he wants to take his son out of the boarding school, and the woman agrees, saying it's the right decision, considering what they did to her daughter's psyche. The next day, the man arrives at the boarding school. Fran is brought out immediately, with no attempt to convince the father to change his mind. The teenager silently sits in the car, not even greeting Luis. On the way home, he absent-mindedly stares out the window. At home, he meets his girlfriend, asking how she's doing. He doesn't talk about his experiences at the boarding school, only expressing regret that there are still many children left in those grim walls. Fran doesn't want to talk to his father, but he's stopped being rude. The boy gets rid of keepsakes from his room, symbolically severing ties with his past self. He refuses gifts from his father, and in his free time, he yells out of the window into the rainy emptiness of the city. But one day, while standing in the kitchen, he reflexively repeats chants from the boarding school, which sparks a conversation. Fran accuses his father of deliberately sending him to sadists for torture. Luis protests, saying he was deceived, then delivers a monologue, admitting to his son that it hasn't been easy for him to raise him alone since the mother left, deeming both of them unnecessary. It's hard for him to say this, so the son only worsens the situation, continuing to accuse his father. In the next scene, they drive silently in a car to some house. Luis steps out to hand the owners some documents, though it's unclear who exactly he's giving them to. After they drive away, Fran asks if it was his mother. Instead of answering, his father exits the car and walks away in the rain. The son catches up to him, and they stand together, embracing and hiding their tears in the downpour.